This is day 68 of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi. If you'd like to sponsor a share or more of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi, please contact me directly. Today's Arukh HaShulchan Yomi is Siman Lamed Ches Sif Hey. Siman Lamed Ches Sif Gimel to Siman Lamed Tes Sif Vav. Siman Lamed Hey Sif Yud Gimel says. Miu lo nikra osek mitzvah. Yesterday I told you about osek mitzvah patam and a mitzvah. Some is not called osek mitzvah in ptur mitzvah acheros in terms of exempting him from the mitzvahs. Elo be'eshi oseh, except at the time he's doing the mitzvah. No kshem mitzvah kvar avar. Now when the mitzvah is already passed. Klomar, for example, kshem miniach tefillin nikra osek mitzvah. You're putting on tefillin. You're called osek mitzvah. Avok shekvar hi nicham. And once you put them on, in other words, already on you. And you're doing a mitzvah, and come nevertheless, not called being involved in mitzvah. When you find a lost object and you're dealing with it, you call dealing with a mitzvah. When you put it in your house, even though you're doing a mitzvah, in that you are safeguarding it, not called being involved in a mitzvah, be exempt from doing another mitzvah. It's not like watching a dead body. There, every moment you're doing an active deed. When you have to pay attention to the body because of mice, etc. And it's true even when you're actually involved mitzvah, when he's down on mitzvah acheres, and another mitzvah comes to your hand, you do both of them without any extra effort. Because if you can be good, don't be called bad. Do both of them. And it's possible that even this halacha that osir mitzvah is only part of mitzvah if the second mitzvah one will be disturbed by mitzvah two. At the long road, it's only that also mitzvah when you have to do an effort in the second mitzvah, other than, or which will therefore impact negatively on the first mitzvah. But not when one effort will help you both, and you can kill two birds with one stone. Bialacha writes that if you're not adding any tircha at all for the second mitzvah, but rather one tircha is both of them, then you certainly should try and do both of them. Arukh HaShulchan says tzarechim, but the Mishnah Berurah says you definitely should try to do both under those circumstances. You're doubt, tired, somebody who's in anguish. Even anguish because of cold. In other words, you get up in the morning, put on tefillin, and you're in a place which is intensely cold. And so to somebody who's not able to concentrate. Because of aches in the pain or aches in the teeth. In any other similar case, where the anguish comes on its own, and he cannot distract himself from this anguish. Even anguish in a commercial activity, or anguish in a mourning. I'm not sure exactly where the commas go here, but let's try it differently, okay? Period. Even though it says in other words, when you can't be Mesiach Das, like you can be Mesiach Das by a velus or commercial activity. It's a little bit of a cumbersome sentence structure here. Then the Tzarek Elush Efshar La'asicha Midaito. I'm sorry, I skipped here. But if your tzar is not like that, and you can't have a Tzarek Elush, once that you cannot distract yourself like a severe toothache, Rachmana litzlan, but you examine tefillin. It is like being in a categorical state of distraction. So therefore it depends. If he can focus and put them on, he has to do that. And even though this is on the books, Mistar is exempt from tefillin, we never heard of such a case where it was actually put into practice. such this principle. Voltika said, move on. Besides that, I'm not sure I understand the actual basis of this halacha. The Makor Rambam, source in the Rambam, in Perek Dal Lochi, he owes Hesach Hadas Kipshuto. That he owes Hesach Hadas is literal when you get distracted. So when you're in a state of anguish, you are distracted. But the Hesach Hadas, in terms of tefillin, only means if you're involved in frivolous behavior. In the case of Mitzvah, there is no Kalus Rosh. Previously, the Arukh HaShulchan said that with difficulty one can explain the Rambam that through anguish one can come to Kalus Rosh. But that's not clear that would be the case according to the Torah and Shulchan Aruch. Therefore, there's no clear-cut practical case in which mitzvah is part. Tezvav. Kosher Rabbeinu B'Yisrael Beis Yosef B'Siv Yud. Hakoreh B'Torah Potem Menachos Tefillin Kol Hayom. Anybody who's reading Torah is exempt from putting on tefillin the entire day. Uzulas B'Shas Kriya Shema Tefillah Akal Sharo, except for the times when he's saying Shema and davening. The Mishnah Berurah says that means you don't have to interrupt your learning in order to put on tefillin. But before you start learning, you certainly have to put on tefillin. And the Gemara writes, even according to Shulchan Aruch, we're only lenient when there is that you don't have to stop learning in order to put them on. But if it's already upon you because of a Shema and Tefillah, or before you start learning, then you have to keep them on during time of learning and not remove them in the middle. Of course, it's talking about when they actually put on tefillin the entire day. Not us today. Okay, so again, back to Arukh HaShulchan. According to Beis Yosef, Hakoreh B'Torah Potem Menachos Tefillin Kol Yom, so that's just Kriya Shema Tefillah Akal Sharo, but Zeh Pi HaMechilta Parshas Bo. It's based on Mechilta Shom. It says Kol Osek B'Torah. Everybody's involved in Torah Potem Menachos Tefillin Ayin Shom. Upirsho Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina Bracha says the Kol Yom Kai. It's going on the entire rest of the day. The law Kriya Shema Tefillah. It's not going time of Shema or davening. So that according to this, for us, that in any event we don't put on the rest of the day. Which shouldn't be brought down as a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. But in order to bavorn, in order to preclude an incorrect assumption according to Mechilta, you're completely pater l'chene view. That's why they brought it down here. Pirshu that Kol Yom Kai explained going on the entire day. Brackets he says here, but Zorua, Simtaktzar Ha'isol Girsaches Mechilta, the Meniach Tefillin Ke'osek B'Torah. That is not a halachic statement, but it is an agadic statement. So he puts on tefillin to zifta in the Torah, the chsil amanti Torah Hashem b'ficha. Tefillin are placed in order the Torah Hashem should be in your mouth, and therefore it's like learning Torah. Mishnah Berurah says that it may well be that even the exemption, which is theoretically the Mechilta's exemption, is only by Torah Sheb'Ksav, but not when Gemara, because by Torah Sheb'Ksav you could say, interestingly enough, that Torah Sheb'Ksav is an os in of itself because it mentions Tzias Mitzrayim. It's a fascinating idea. Also, the Mishnah Berurah says the Grub Paskins that specifically somebody who's Torasa Umnuso. Torah is his craft. Those are people exempt from tefillin, perhaps while learning Torah. But we who are not considered to be Torasa Umnuso, we have to interrupt in order to put on tefillin. Test Zion. Lechot tefillin b'fnei Rabbi. Should not take off tefillin in front of your Rebbe. The Zil Zulush Megala Rosha before him. It's a mockery of the Rebbe, or scoffing at the Rebbe, to reveal your head in front of him. Elifnei Yitzad Acher, turn to the side, B'Yachlosh upon him, take tefillin not directly in front of him. The Tzarech Lios Eimas Rabolov, you have to have the awe of your fear of your Rebbe upon you. Elifnei Sefer Torah Lechot, so to prove Sefer Torah, you should not take a tefillin directly upon its side. Acher, you turn to a different direction. According to this reason, also in front of one's father, one should not be allowed to take a tefillin. El Shalom or Gukain, the custom is not to be machmer in that case. Now, the poskim Lois Kram said the poskim also do not mention this. The Tzarech L'Tefillin u'Mezuzah ve'em yel Masegas Lichno Shteihem. What if a person needs to buy both tefillin and mezuzah, and he can't buy both at the moment? Tefillin koydem. Tefillin comes first. Shichu chovash aguva, because it's an obligation upon your body as opposed to on your house. But in tefillin yachol yishol machar, you can borrow from somebody else. Mezuzah koydem, then buy mezuzah first. Nuda mitzora, a person who's in cherem, or a person Rahman Islam has saras, are similar near tefillin but not allowed to put on tefillin. Mishnah writes that the Rebbe in front of whom you're not allowed to take off your tefillin, that's specifically Rava Muvak, the Rebbe in which you learn most of your Torah, which really is a rare thing nowadays. Mishnah also writes that the Achronim, but some Achronim say the opposite, that Mitzvah are required to put on tefillin, and the Pri Megadim writes that you put them on without a bracha, and the Bria Gra says that you're even supposed to make a bracha. This is highly improbable in our day and age, such a situation. But the similar Mateus, who are the people who are allowed to write tefillin? Me, Kohen, tefillin, and from who we can purchase tefillin. And we're going to start with Aleph. Tefillin should cost fun. Eved or Isha, or written by a slave or a woman or katan or child. Even at the age of chinuch, and even if he's 13 but it doesn't have two hairs. Kuti here means an actual Samaritan, it seems. Or Avarel Torah, a sinner who sins in the entire Torah. Or a non-Jew, a Mechal Shabbos, or somebody who desecrates the Sabbath. Or even somebody who only commits one Avera. But he does it to anger Kodesh Baruch Hu, even if it's an Avera Rabbanan. Or Malshin Lanos, or somebody who snitches on Jewish property to people who then come and compel the Jews to give it up. All these people are possible to write film. It says those you tie and you write. Anybody who ties, and believes in it, writes. Somebody does not tie. Like a woman, a slave, a child, deaf mute, and a person who is mentally impaired, or but doesn't believe in it, like all those which we noted, cannot write film. The katan is possible. As long as we don't know for sure that he has two hairs, it's possible. Even though he attained the age of 13 in one day. By a Torah mitzvah, such as film, we don't rely on the chazaka that he has the simanim of two hairs. The says to see me, it seems the avrayan tefillin bilvad. If somebody who's an avrayan, no other mitzvah except for tefillin. Even though he's not doing it to anger HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he doesn't put on tefillin. Possibly he's supposed to write. Even though he could check the zelk she'achad bodek lo sakin, if somebody else checks his knife. Kamosh kasi yodes in base. And tefillin ain't on them on the but if tefillin he doesn't put on tefillin, just like by shechita, he's not believed to check his own knife. By tefillin, he's not believed to testify that his own tefillin written properly if he does not fulfill the mitzvah. Because it's difficult to write tefillin properly, and he's not he's not stringent in the mitzvah of tefillin. Some people say that people don't put on tefillin because they're lazy, because it's hard to do, because it's a pain. It's kosher. The mikre bar kashira, because he's called theoretically a bar kashira, somebody who can wear tefillin. Like in shchita, somebody who is makbid on kosher is considered to be a bar zvicha. Somebody who's part and parcel of the category of people who maintain the mitzvah shchita. To me, I'm astonished. The need bar kshiru, granted, he can put on that tefillin. I know what's the truck doesn't like when it goes to the effort. So this is like analogous to in case of shchita. When a person who's not meticulous on kashrus, but only the te'avim, only because he's too lazy or he likes the taste of cheeseburgers. If a Jew doesn't check the knife he uses, can't even run shchita because he's afraid he doesn't have the Yer Shamayim to be meticulous. Somebody whose left hand has been amputated, he can write in tefillin, even though he can't put on film. The Bar Kshirahu, he could put on film, but he has no arm on which has no arm which to put it on. Which is they bear hated that a Moser, somebody who divulges Jews to the authorities, is possible even if he does it with te'ava, even if he does for the kishmak of giving Jews over the authorities. Yeah, never. But Allah says Pri Megadim is not sure about that. There's apostles to write unless the katan has a complete set of hair in his beard, meaning that he has most of his beard grown in. Or if it doesn't have most going in because it's scraggly, he's more than 35 years old. Or that he has the simonim of a Swiss who never will attain a physical majority. The Bir Halacha talks about an 18-year-old. If it works, if that's okay, even if his beard is not full. And he says, but the Yevid, yes, if an 18-year-old writes it, even if he doesn't have a full beard, you don't have to be machmer. Mishabur writes, even if when a person doesn't put on tefillin, even if he's not doing lahachis, he's still puzzled because he's not a bar kshira. Only if he is a more thiavon, such as in the case where his business makes him so busy that he doesn't put on tefillin, that's still considered to be a bar kshira. That's only the evidence. Not to allow such a person to write a Sivri Torah tefillin mezuzos, and even if other people are standing over him and telling him to write lishma, and if it's a mumar, only for one tefillin. In other words, he'll put on either the sharosh or the shoyat, it's not both. So then he's also not called a bar kshira, I guess, because each mitzvah is separate. Continuing, the Arukh HaShulchan base. Call commotion psulim l'chsivas parashos, just like these people can't write the parashos. They may not make the batim and the ritzuros and tie the tefillin and sew the tefillin. But to cure the hides, kshein their kosher. In goru ben os laos, so too if they scratch between letters, lo chayshin lezeh. I'm not sure what they're doing here. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Mishnah Berurah says. That the about the ibud with the curing, we saw that by a non-Jew you need Yisrael standing over him and make sure that it is small, like we saw in Simulam base, and that's true by cotton as well, but not by these people who are listening to Sifalif, who are possible to write but not possible to cure. Now Mishnah Berurah says that what we're talking about when he scratches between the letters, that's okay. That's referring to removing glue, which is between letters. Preferably, they shouldn't be the ones who do it. But the Evid, that's not a problem. All this is by tefillah, which has to be kasidra. But by Sefer Torah, if you can, since you can scratch out the size of the letters and rewrite them, so you can, this fellow can do that, and then you just rewrite the letters. So it's not much of a problem. In that case, even Chatchila can do it. So again, by telling b'di'evet, it's not appropriate, but they did it. By the Sefer Torah, it's even Chatchila, because you can go and rewrite the letters because they don't have any Sidron. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. Okay, let's figure out Sefer Torah. Yech machshir that these people can sew together Sefer Torah. Finally, there's Simon Reish Ayin Ches. If you have Shebenu, Misho said for Yasnashim, some say women can't sew Sefer Torah. And after Bianu Shom Leheter. And he said he is making on women sewing Sefer Torah. The Bir Halacha is not sure about this, and therefore he says to avoid it. And he says, yeah, but some people it's possible. And some people say if it's easy to undo the sewing, which woman did, and to sew them again by a man, he should fix them. But the evidence, otherwise the evidence you don't have to be macher. The place in the minhag is that they do give women Sefer Torah to sew, and you can't change their minhag. You have to warn them and be careful that the first and last stitch, and also in the middle, somewhere I guess, a sofer should initiate, and then only afterwards give the women the rest to sew. Okay, evidently this is a big issue in the whole country. Back to the Rishon. Also, by sewing the tefillin and making the ritzuos of the tefillin, women are kosher rock with batim sulim. Only by batim the pasuk neshiyesh by mashin dahavik ksiva, because the shin in the bais, which should only be the shalosh, obviously is like writing. Bialacha writes, also discusses the bottom, and he concludes that since all the tikkunim and making the shin all called making tefillin, and all of it's one production, there's no section between different parts of making the tefillin, so it's more machmer. But he says that if a cotton is 13 years old and we don't know it has two hairs made the bottom, etc., you don't have to be macher b'di'evet. No. You have to be macher b'di'evet in terms of the covering and the sewing, as long as the making of the shin was done by an adult. Gimel, ger. Now here it has in brackets biyam kamonim in old days because probably because of censorship. Shechaz l'daito. A ger went back to his original religion machmasir because of fear. Paska rosh v'atur v'ashulchan shekasher lichtov. Doesn't cancel the gerus. You can still write. Avon mitalis is king and lonely that king. L'chein rif aram lo leviuze. But other Rishonim don't say that way. Therefore, if somebody is a ger goes back to the original religion, we assume that they are not Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Even if we don't see any evidence that they're not being Shomer Torah mitzvahs, but they've identified as original religion, that in and of itself is a problem. The Mishnah brings down, even if in secret this person keeps Torah, you still should be lenient. And he says, it's interesting things. Even if in secret he keeps Torah, but he is lazy to put on tefillin, you shouldn't be lenient because he's not a bar kshira. And certainly if it's a mumar for the entire Torah, unless it's because of fear that that he'll be killed, then that's why he's afraid to keep the Torah even in private. Then one can be lenient because although there's a concept of Arukh Yavor, a person does not go ahead with the Arukh Yavor, is still considered to be a kosher Jew. He just didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. But back to Arukh HaShulchan. Tefillin written by a heretic. The Allah explains that a min here is an apikores who is very, very meticulous about his Avodah Zarah. And he talks about, the Mishnah also talks about an apikores who does not believe the words of Chazal. And he discusses whether that's also including, and concludes that if he rejects that which mutter food and eats usher food, even in one aspect, he's already considered apikores. And these people in our day and age who are not considered all do mitzvahs, and it's prevalent by them that Mechal Shabbos in public also. They have the halacha, the status of karoim. And it's better that to erase their substitute and write others instead of them. But if you cannot erase them, even tefillin, but you can't erase them because of it's Shalok Sidron, or because letters Hashem, Tzarech Yom L'Maisa. Okay, so he does fudge a little bit at the end. So I guess maybe because they're Tinoko Shenishbu, like we know from the Chazon and other sources. Back to the Arukh HaShulchan. Finish custom min Yisroel tefillin written by a min, whatever it is, it should be burned. Yeshim, some say so some say they just be put into geniza, like shemus. Mishnah brings down the Mechaber's opinion is that they should be burned, and therefore that is the simple halacha. B'shekasem kuti gankin I think Arukh HaShulchan says if it's written by kuti, also they're supposed to be put in the geniza. Tefillin seems to be a min film which are found in the hands of not apikores, or whatever mean is defined as. We don't know who wrote them. You know those should be put in geniza. You need to be found in the hands of a non-Jew. Ksherim, we assume the kosher. The Vada Yisrael Ksavon. Certainly a Jew wrote them. They made a beginning of the because the non-Jew we don't suspect knows how to write them. Mamzer kosher tefillin, and Mamzer also may write tefillin. I'm be there similar to Dalit ein lochim sfarim tefillin mezuzah mina akum yosef ketei d'meim harbei. You don't buy the sfarim sefer Torah tefillin mezuzah from a non-Jew if they is charging much more than their value. They take it all up because otherwise they're going to keep. They're going to steal our tefillin and price gouge us. They shall novely exalt. Mishnah Berurah writes that even the you should try and negotiate with the non-Jew. If he doesn't come down in price, then you can leave them in his hands. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. Aval hosi matok deidmeim to add a little bit to the value. Mutzar so mitzvah does miyadam mitzvah to redeem them from his hands. Mishnah Berurah writes that even if you're eventually going to have to put them in geniza, such as where the non-Jew wrote them, nevertheless it's a mitzvah to redeem them in order to put them in geniza. Wow! But if an apikoros wrote them, in the case where the Shulchan Aruch says it requires burning, then you don't have to buy for them in order to burn them. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. Tefillin cannot be only purchased from a sofer who's an expert, who is who knows, who knows which be extra letters, which be missing letters, and is conversant with Hilchos Tefillin. And the reason why this is because otherwise we're afraid he's going to be lazy in checking them, because it's a pain to remove the sewing and re-sew them. But a mezuzah and parshas of tefillin can be bought even from a person not as expert, as long as somebody else checks them. Interesting. Back to the Arukh HaShulchan. We took to what the tefillin from somebody who's not an expert. So we have to check them. We check them in the written with the proper extra and missing letters. We say Shabbat Yabaki Gam Shadin. We stomach he was also knew the other halachos. The early says Roshim seems to me Imitzon Mashitos Shitos Shem Mechuvani, which is part of the Simulamed. If we saw that the lines are not 7 lines for Shal Yad and 4 lines for Rosh, like we saw in the Tefillin, which we examined, that the Shal Yad only had 6 lines, not 7 lines, and they weren't with the right words, the proper line, top of the line, at the beginning of the line, Hura Kochon. And they are in question. And some kind of land, we don't rely upon them. And like in these barish, unless we know for sure the next person wrote that. And he is saying the possible, yeah, it's true, it's not possible, yeah, but you come, nevertheless, it is a reason to question the validity of these tefillin. Mr. Bura says, if you bought them from, if you check the tefillin and they were properly written, and the seller says that he wrote them himself or he bought them from another person, so we assume that person wrote them because from whom they're taken, because they all came together in one batch. Okay. Hey. Arukh HaShulchan say idim lagach harbei zugos tefillin by many tefillin nishin yodel mucha. If they don't know for the actually, I think the Mishnah Berurah is going on this halacha, even though no, it's on the previous halacha in the Piskei Mishnah Berurah. It's probably going this halacha. In lagach harbei zugos tefillin nishin yodel mucha. If it's bought many tefillin from somebody who's not known to be an expert, it's like checking lettuce. But you may have shloshet tefillin shtaim sheyav achas sharosh. They check 3 heads. 2 tefillin shayad and 1 sharosh, or shtaim sharosh v'achas shayad, or vice versa. Mitzvah kshem you find the kosher. Husu kulam kshem also be kosher. Vein ashar tzichem dika. The other ones do not have to be checked. The Shmur says here again, if he says he wrote himself, or he says he bought them from a person who is a single person, we assume that person is the one who wrote all of them. The Mishnah Berurah says also that if you check them it's not you have to check the chasei and service. You have to check the forms of the letters as well, which of course by cheap tefillin they take the letters taken on dubious forms. I think the Mishnah Berurah got in the right place, and I just read it wrong in the wrong place. So I apologize to Piskei Mishnah Berurah. He did write in the right place. I just read the wrong place. That if you buy, if he says he bought them from one person, then we assume that it all comes from one person, as long as in one batch. Okay. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. That you can recognize it's all one writing. You assume his writing is kosher. And because there are several batches, there's obviously came with several soifim. You have to check from each batch this way. 2 of shayad and 1 of shrosh, or vice versa. Somebody says they were the tefillin of a great man, or they bought them from or they bought them from an expert. Naaman is believed. Naaman be certain. One was believed in prohibitions. It should be checked. As long as you can trust the seller. As long as. Which are assumed to be kosher, and they never need to be checked. Not twice every 7 years, not once every 7 years, not ever. If you only put them occasionally, then they have to be checked twice every 7 years. Because they're afraid maybe they rotted in the meantime. But in Bob and mine, most of they were submerged in water. You have to check. But if you know somebody can properly sew them afterwards, You should better not to open them to check. You can't put them on without having checked them. Mishabura says that you can even make a bracha upon them because there's no definitive reusa, no definitive suspicion here. But in a matter when it requires bdika according to the letter of the law, such as where the bottom became ripped or they were soaked in water, if you don't have somebody to check and tie them and resew them, you put them on without a bracha because there's no chazaka in such an instance. Back to Rosh Hashanah, this is according to strictly over the law. Now we know that our ink is defective and it jumps off the parchment. Therefore, we have to check them on occasion, not specified by the Arukh HaShulchan. This is the proper mode of conduct. Mishabur also says sometimes get ruined because of perspiration.